Okay, my last video on the topic, I mentioned how the minigames happen to have a few continuity errors here and there, and I explained it as memories from the system and children combining, aka remnants, just in a physical form. But this isn't about the minigames, but rather the motive itself, and how William doesn't have any reason to kill these kids, or at least not in the method that he had. See, this video was originally going to be how William killed these 5 kids out of anger that the restaurant, despite all the missing children, was still the same, filled with neglectful parents. He wanted to show them a lesson. After all, why do they get to keep their children and he doesn't? But then I hit a snag with another theory I've had since apparently May, looking back, that being the save thems are likely the gravestone children, despite popular belief. I've done several videos on it before, so just go and watch them. Continuing, William had come here after learning the truth about Remnant for his son, but my issue about these two theories is, if William came to Freddy's looking for his son, why stuff another kid into the same suit? I don't know how such a blaring issue slipped past me, but I'd officially hit a wall and started to backtrack my steps and see if there was some clue or issue I missed, or an easier path, and the truth isn't what you'd think. See, the majority of the community think William is just a serial killer, with the motive, if he even has one, caused by his jealousy for Henry Emily. This gives him a flat motive. He just enjoys killing, so he kept at it. But as both the Silver Eyes trilogy and the later half of the games tell us, William was much more than just a shadow luring kids to their doom. He was forcing them into experiments and testing on them, all in the search of learning how to control Remnant, which I mentioned briefly earlier, that being a mixture of metal-like liquid in someone's soul. This could then be injected into another body and even cause 2 or more souls to exist in one body at a time. In the books, we're told that after what happened to Charlie, Henry became obsessed with putting her back together, creating robot versions of her, hoping she would come back to life. William attempts to replicate this by stealing a version of Charlie and attempting to learn what makes her tick in order to achieve immortality. Meanwhile, in the games, after he's spring-locked, William's main motivation at that point seems just to kill Michael, to the point he's willing to go into a trap, points I've made before. William had originally believed that fire would dampen the effect of Remnant, potentially freeing the souls, and yet he chose to stay in Frights while it burned. Instead of going to his bunker to put himself back together again, he chooses to go to the FNAF 6 location. At every turn, William makes the wrong decision time after time, unless in the games, his motivation never was to become immortal. So if William wasn't chasing immortality or murdering just for fun, that leaves one more option on the table, that being grief. And yet all of these, every single one, does not work with the events of Save Them. See, Baby tells us during the events of Sister Location that the spring-lock suit she stuffs you into on night 4 was from her original pizzeria, and given Baby's is opened after the closing of Freddy's, while also still having spring-lock suits be in circulation, that means Circus Baby's Pizza World has to be open during either 1985 or 1986. This means the experiments and the funtimes all predate the events of FNAF 2, leaving an issue I ignored most of the time in the community, but only now see as much more important than I originally thought. Why go from robots built for kidnapping and luring, only to go back to killing kids in dangerous murder suits? Well, isn't it obvious? After the death of Elizabeth, he stopped using them, or at least that's what most theorists who try to go this route claim, and yet the opening scene of Sister Location has Afton alive, trying to convince someone to use one of his animatronics, which doesn't make sense if this was Circus Babies, given Afton would still be a pretty big name in the company and probably running the business himself. Why would he feel the need to persuade someone into using the animatronics, if not referring to the later venture post-Elizabeth, that being Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals? This mixed with the code from Scott Games makes it definitely seem like the animatronics were still being rented out, and likely still used for their initial purpose. So again, I ask, why does William choose to go to Freddy's to kill more children? The other option many go with is William went there for remnant. Sure, but the remnant of the original kids, and the reasoning is always to have more remnant. But again, why risk it all when you have a perfectly fine method of gathering remnant? In order for these sets of events to work, there has to be a reason to stop using the funtimes, a solution to said question at Freddy's, and something to cause him to kill those other kids. But as it stands, none of the known ways of using this information feels satisfying, as well as unanswered. After playing around, I found different paths, but none really work without causing additional problems to the timeline, such as diving into soul splitting. This method in bare bones, or at least my version, is the belief that the endoskeletons and costumes both contain remnant. This would allow for endoskeletons to be removed, but the costumes still be possessed. While this has a good chance of being the case, especially pre-FNAF 3, it creates more issues in the sister location department, as leaving the shells would imply leaving parts of themselves in said shells, and potentially Michael. It would also make you question whether or not the toy costumes, which also show up in FNAF 3, are haunted. It's a whole mess, not to mention I was trying to make it work to explain how we could have gone there for Crying Child, but managed to collect Cassidy's remnant instead. But we have the issue of Cassidy has to be inside the costume for that version to work, and that would mean that endos can be separated from Springlock suits, which still has yet to ever be shown. Why risk scooping when he shoved a new kid in there? But what about if there was no Save Them Kids? Well, that creates even more issues. Slightly, assuming there was no MCI in 1987, suddenly 1987 has no correlation to Golden Freddy. We can't figure out what suit William was using, as the later games show Spring Bonnie, but Follow Me shows Golden Freddy. And we then have Possessed Freddy and Golden Freddy looking at their corpses in this new location, despite being killed at an old one. And even down this path, there is no motive to come to Freddy's after circus babies. This is the one piece of the puzzle I can't reasonably solve, and the closest I've gotten was my method, but still has the issue of why put Cassidy in the same suit instead of taking his son back to the bunker. Let me know what you guys can come up with. Just make sure it answers those 3 questions, so that we can hopefully be able to put all of your answers together, look at every method that is out there, and try and come up with a solution ourselves, because at the moment, I don't think there is an actually good reasoning as to how Save Them as an event can occur. It is the one issue inside of my entire timeline of events and makes things too complicated to not be possible. With that being said, right now I am having to go through and edit a bunch of videos, write a bunch of videos, because I'm going to be going on a Five Nights at Freddy's sort of detox thing. I mentioned it in my last video. I am just really burnt out with Five Nights at Freddy's content. Not me making it, but rather burnt out from consuming it. It is extremely difficult to scroll through Twitter, to scroll through YouTube, and just to see the constant harassment and mocking of theorists in this community. And it gets to a point where you just don't want to listen to anybody anymore, because it feels like no good information is being shared. It just feels like everybody's shitting on each other, and it's not a very fun environment to be in. So for the time being, I'm going to be taking a bit of a break from Five Nights at Freddy's myself. After I've got all these videos written down and got them all edited, I'm going to end up releasing them week by week, so that way you are still getting Five Nights at Freddy's content, but I'm not having to consume any, if that makes sense. Essentially, I'm still going to be making Five Nights at Freddy's videos, so that means there's no reason for you to unsubscribe because he's not making Five Nights at Freddy's videos anymore. But no, I'm just not going to be consuming any Five Nights at Freddy's content. With that being said, if you have any videos or things of that sort you want to see going forward, just let me know inside of the comments, whether that be theories or just small little tidbits, anything. Just let me know inside of the comments below, so that way I can go on to do a complete video about reacting to all of that content and reacting to all this stuff and just having a fun time. I might even make it a live stream. We will see. But I think that's going to be it for the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Or at some point, hopefully I discover what this thing is. Matane.